Diva hero player is undeniably a true hero. He was invited to RBET Rulers 2 consecutive years in a row, placed 5th at Deck Devastators 3, 3rd at Gladiators of Edison, and came in top 8 at Peak Beak 3.
What up, YouTube? It's your boy ATrueHero, and I got a question for you. How many times does your boy have to top until he reaches 1K? Please, if you're not already subscribed, go ahead and press that button. But anyway, here with a very quick deck profile. I'm not going to get into too much detail because I have a full breakdown video on my channel. So if you're interested why I play cards like Gold Sark, why I don't play Snowman Eater, please check out that video. It's called Diva Hero Breakdown. Anyway, I'm just going to talk about the specific tech choices that I played for this tournament. But before I go a step further, let me talk about the man himself, Keegan. For those of you who follow both Keegan and myself, you know that recently we had a collab, and we actually filmed 2 separate videos. One trolley version of Diva Hero for his channel, and a serious version which I have yet to upload. The reason why I didn't upload that video was because I didn't want my exact deck list to be published before the event. And even within that small time frame, I changed the deck list. But anyway, for this list, the only notable changes that I made between my previous list are the inclusion of double bottomless. Bottomless trap hole, I played it at 1 because it's not good in every matchup. However, Diva Hero's worst matchups struggle against bottomless. For example, Black Wings. Black Wings get absolutely destroyed by bottomless. Gladiator Beast also gets destroyed by bottomless. So, because a lot of the bad matchups that Diva Hero has loses to bottomless, it makes sense to play 2. Secondly, let's look at the side deck, because these cards, main deck Mind Crush, main deck Deck Devi, I've already explained before why I main these cards. So let's take a look at the side deck. The side deck is actually really the reason why I was able to top this event. Double Consecrated, double Cyber, Crow, double Falsadina, Vanities, Nobleman, Smashing, Soul Exchange, Light Mirror, Mask Restrict, double Decree. To be honest with you guys, I actually have a personal Diva Hero side deck guide that I utilize for every matchup. That way, I don't even have to think. I can just refer to the side deck sheet that I made, side in and out, and be ready for my next match. I actually got the idea from my teammate, Frazier. However, the reason why I have never made this video public is because, guys, you can't be me. You can't be a true hero. Listen, I'm giving you all this free Diva Hero content just for you, but I can't make a side deck guide. So for all of those of you who are wishing a true hero, when are you going to drop a side deck guide? Well, I have good news for you, right? Bad news and good news. The bad news, like I said, I'm not going to ever drop a definitive side deck guide video for this deck. Ever. Because then you're just going to be me. A true hero wants to see the hero in you. Not the hero in me in you, but the hero in you. And the good news, though, is although I will never come up with a definitive side deck video, in my other YouTube series, such as Kaiba Talks, I have a specific section in that video where I talk about siding. And Kaiba Talks is going to talk about each and every matchup. So if you pay attention, you're going to know what I side in and out with Diva Hero. That way, you still get the knowledge, you know? But I can't spoon feed it to you. But anyway, back to the side deck. The reason for double consecrated is because Black Wings, as I said earlier, is one of this deck's worst matchups. So you need every help that you can get. This stops Black Wings, stops Vayu Turbo. If you go against the Neuralis deck randomly, it shuts down that as well. So Consecrated is an amazing tech choice. Now, you might begin to wonder, a true hero, how can you play Consecrated in a deck with mostly all darks? I mean, look at the list. More than half of the deck has dark monsters. Well, that's because Consecrated doesn't hurt Diva Hero as much as it hurts dark decks. Typically, those dark decks, Vayu Turbo, Neuralis, Black Wings, they play all dark monsters, whereas we only play some dark monsters. And the point of the deck is to summon Absolute Zero. So if you have Absolute Zero or even a Stratos with a Consecrated Light, you're going to be in a good situation. Plus, you can get rid of the Consecrated Light at any time because I main deck triple Caius. And the way the Edison ruling is you can actually tribute Consecrated for a face-up dark monster. So if at any point the Consecrated Light is hindering you too much, just sacrifice it for Caius. And then when you're ready to make that big push, go for it. So double Consecrated Light, double Cyber needs no explanation, Crow needs no explanation, double False Medina needs no explanation. And once again, the reason why I'm going through these cards quickly is because I've already explained them on my breakdown video. So please, if you haven't checked out the videos like Kaiba Talks or Diva Hero Breakdown, check them out if you want to know more in detail. Anyway, Vanities needs no explanation. Now, I went back to siding one Nobleman of Crossout. The reason being is because actually I main deck Devi. And for the most part, Devi and Nobleman hit the same cards. But you can argue that Devi does a little bit of a better job of doing so because of all the additional benefits. However, the reason why I included Nobleman in the side again is because one, Devi is only one card, and you need as many cards to hit face down monsters as possible. Absolute Zero Diva Hero decks struggle with face down monsters. Another reason why the deck plays triple Caius to get rid of those problems. So, Nobleman is an additional utility card that you can use to get rid of face down monsters. And it's a lot easier to activate and resolve. Whereas Devi, you need to tribute a dark monster with an attack of 2000 or more, and you might not always have that dark monster. So this is why I went into siding one Nobleman again. One Smashing, one Soul Release, one Light Mirror. Now previously I was siding double Light Mirror, but the reason why I dropped it down to one is because Light Mirror does not actually solve the problem against light decks. The only light monster that Diva Hero struggles against is Christia. And Light Mirror doesn't stop Christia's continuous effect. Therefore, there's no reason to summon two, or rather to play two. But Light Mirror is good against Light Sworns, and it is good at stopping recruiters such as Shining Angel, Nova Summoner, etc. So it still deserves a spot in the side deck, just not at 2. Mask of Restrict. Now this here is a floodgate. I was actually torn between one of two cards, and not to beat the dead horse, but if you watch my side deck video, or rather Kaiba talked about frogs, I explained in excruciating detail every card that you can side against frogs. So one of the cards is Mask of Restrict, and another card that I considered is actually Fog King. For those of you who are unaware what Fog King does, Fog King, and I can actually just search it here to show you, right? So Fog King, he is a water monster. So we need to start there. He's a water monster, and he basically has the same exact effect as Mask of Restrict, except for you contribute either one or no monster to summon it. So the reason why Fog King is so good is because he's Mask of Restrict, but he's a water monster, which obviously plays into the theme of Absolute Zero. Now, ultimately, I decided to go with Mask of Restrict over Fog King, and the only reason being is because I didn't want to waste my normal summon. So I think they're both equally as good in Diva Hero, but you need a floodgate to shut down frogs because the frog deck inherently has an advantage over Diva Hero. Because Diva Hero, think about what your best plays are. Your best plays are summoning Monarchs or summoning Absolute Zero. Sorry, not summoning Monarchs, but that is a really good play. Summoning Synchros, right? Summoning Synchros or summoning Absolute Zero. And pretty much every Monarch that they can summon deals with all of those cards out of the extra deck. You summon an absolute zero, okay, they can get rid of it with one Caius. And they're not afraid about losing their field because usually they don't have much of a field to get blown up, right? Also, you summon a Synchro, you have Stardust. Well, goodbye Stardust. He'll get banished. He'll get bounced to the extra deck. So this is why Master Restrict is needed, because it's a really difficult matchup. Not to mention, Master Restrict prevents the opponent from summoning Vanity's Fiend. And if your opponent summons Vanity's Fiend, then it's the same as them dropping a Christie against you. So not only does Master Restrict shut down their deck, but it also prevents them from summoning one of the deck's worst matchup, which is Vanity's Fiend. The last side deck card I'll talk about here is Double Decree. Now, I actually was not going to side Double Decree, but I was playtesting against one of my best friends, and I convinced him to play Veyu Turbo for the event. And we were playing back and forth, and he was absolutely destroying me. Like, it wasn't even close. And it was because of his trap cards. And I said, you know what? I'm sick of it. I'm tired of it. I'm not dealing with these trap cards anymore. And I sided in Double Decree. And from that point on, I started to really put it in there. But anyway, Decree is really good because it shuts down everything. It shuts down the main card that the deck loses to, Royal Oppression, as well as other cards such as D-Prison, Mirror Force, Torrential, etc. So Decree is perfect. And if you're up against Black Wings and you have Decree with Consecrated, unless they have a non-dark monster, it's going to be very hard for them to out that board and to win. So anyway, like I said, I'm not going to explain too much longer about my tech choices. That explains all the things that were changed from the previous events. I guess one last thing I'll mention, going back to the joke video that I made with Keegan, a lot of players in the comments were asking, is ATrueHero on Ordeal of the Traveler? Is he really playing that card? Let me give you my final thoughts about Ordeal. I actually do believe Ordeal has a place in the meta. It's really good against certain decks, but it's also really bad against certain decks. The decks that Ordeal are amazing against, Veyu Turbo. They don't really have a way to deal with that card. And if they attack into your Ordeal and their cards get sent back, that's it. Also, Hero Beat. Hero Beat also struggles against Ordeal of the Traveler. The only card that they wouldn't mind getting Ordealed is Stratos. But the rest of their deck, their aliases, their fusions, if those cards get Ordealed, they're in big trouble. But when we look at the meta as a whole, we see decks like Frogs. Frogs don't care about Ordeal of the Traveler. They're always going to have a Monarch, or they'll want their Monarch to be bounced, right? They don't care about that card. Or even the Machina deck. They don't care if their Geoframe gets bounced, right? So, or other decks as well, right? The point is, Ordeal is such a risky card, it's not worth main decking. So in the future, I actually might consider side decking Ordeal for some difficult matchups. So that'll be all for the intro to this video, and I hope you guys enjoy this tournament report. Once again, please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and ask yourself, is there a hero in you? Okay, so round one, I'm up against Aarontknow. Now, for those of you who followed my previous replay analysis, you know during tournaments, I stick to a scheme, either all rock, all paper, or all scissors. But for this tournament, I just decided to pick whatever I felt like. I just kept it random. Now, in my initial hand, it's not very strong, but it's not bad either. Even though Gilman's in my opening hand, essentially making Diva dead, it's not a bad hand. Spine Gilman has a bad rap in the Diva hero community. People love to talk trash about Spine Gilman and say how he's such a terrible draw, but he's not. 1700 is actually quite a strong attack baseline in Edison format. Not to mention, because people disrespect him so much, people don't want to use their power cards on him, like Mirror Force or Torrential. So Spine Gilman winds up actually doing quite well when you draw him, and he can run over a lot of things, and get in a lot of attacks as well. So yes, of course, you don't want to draw Spine Gilman, but it's not the end of the world when you do draw him. Also, Diva Hero has a few tricks that you can do when you pull Spine Gilman, such as you can actually stack Spine Gilman to the top of the deck with Plague Spreader and then summon Diva, and that way you can get your Spine Gilman. And it doesn't even have to be a Diva. You can just play a search card like Rhoda. So there's many ways to put Spine Gilman back in the deck to make Diva live again. But even if that's not the case, drawing Spine Gilman, it's better than drawing a Vayu. It's better than drawing a Titanial. So don't begin to think that it's the end of the world when you draw Spine Gilman. Anyway, with that rant aside, my opening hand, I decided to allure to see what I can find in my deck. And I wound up banishing the evil guy. Now, generally, you actually want to keep your heroes and your warders to make your Miracle Fusions live. But the reason why I decided to ban Prodigy was because I pulled into Gold Sark. And with Gold Sark, I can actually Gold Sark into Future Fusion. So by Gold Sarking into Future Fusion, then I'll have both my hero and my warder covered. So there's no reason actually to hold on to a Prodigy, especially with Caius being as powerful as he is within this format. So I decided to Gold Sark for Future Fusion, set Torrential, and pass. The reason why I did not summon Spine Gilman is because I don't want to wind up Torrentialing my Spine Gilman. If my opponent commits a monster to the board, at that point I could Torrential and then begin Spine Gilman beatdown. So at this point, I have no idea what my opponent's on because it's round 1 of the tournament, so it could be anything. He allures and he banishes a Battle Fader, which means he could be playing one of 2 decks. Either 1, he could be playing Monarchs, or 2, he could be playing Quick Draw. So he sets a monster and he passes. I draw into Sangan, I set Sangan, and I pass. Now, generally, I prefer to ram Sangan into face down monsters because worst case scenario, you run into a hamster and you take a bit of damage, but it's not the end of the world. Now, in this particular situation, the reason why I did not attack the face down is because let's assume that the face down is a Raikou. Generally, in Edison format, you should assume that the face down monster is a hamster or a Raikou. And if you have to choose between the two, go with Raikou. So let's assume that his face down monster is a Raikou. If I go Sangan, attack his face down Raikou, the Raikou will flip up and then it'll hit my set card, which is Torrential. So Torrential will be destroyed, and then on his turn, he'll sack Sangan for a Caius. Because one of the best plays in Edison format is Hamster Raikou Caius, or even just Raikou Caius. It's a really, really good follow-up because you get so many pluses. So I can't afford to lose my back row and getting my Sangan banished. If he just has Raikou, then on his turn, when he flips up Raikou, I can actually activate Torrential. And even though it's a 2-for-1, I get a Sangan search. So it's not that bad. Now, I pass to my opponent, and my opponent does indeed have the Caius. He sacks the Treeborn, so it wasn't a Raikou or a hamster, but he sacks the Treeborn for a Caius, which I'm completely okay with because I can Torrential and then search out a Plague. And the reason why I searched out Plague is for all the reasons I just explained earlier about the different tricks that you can do with Spine Gilman. Not to mention, I have Return from a Different Dimension in my hand, which means the Malicious will be banished next turn when I play Future Fusion, and the Plague can easily get itself banished at any point in time. So, by having Stardust back behind a Return and a 0 coming as well, it puts me in a really strong situation. So, on my turn, I draw and I pull the absolute worst draw that I could have asked for. But looking at the replay, I shouldn't complain too much, right? Because my opponent drew into a Miracle Fusion and was forced to pass. He didn't really have much of a play. But on my turn, I draw into Malicious. And the reason why I draw into Malicious is such a bad draw here is because now I cannot Future Fusion and send the Malicious. Now when I Future Fusion, I have to send another target. So my whole plan of making a level 8 Synchro such as Stardust and then banishing Plague and banishing Molly went out the window because I pulled the absolute worst card I could have at that point in time. So when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. And this was the start of Spine Gilman Beatdown. So I swing, direct for 17, Future Fusion, send, Treeborn, and Prodigy. And with that, I pass. My opponent draws, he summons Swamp, sends a Unifrog, returns Swamp, passes after setting a back row. Now on my turn, I draw, and he immediately flips Trap Dust Shoot. Now, of course, at this point, I'm a little disappointed that I get Dust Shooted, because had he not Dust Shooted me, I would have been able to sack this Gilman for Caius, banish his Treeborn, and also deck Devi away the Caius if it was in ever a dangerous or threatening position. So my opponent Dust Shoots me, and of course he sends back the Caius, but it's not the end of the world because now, once again, I can get in another direct attack with Spine Gilman. So as you can see, guys, drawing Spine Gilman, I don't want to draw Spine Gilman, but it's not the end of the world drawing him. Spine Gilman by himself has already taken out almost half of his life points. So I synchro into Catastor and I set deck Devi and I flip it up immediately because I don't want something dangerous to happen and I want to have complete knowledge of his hand. So I deck Devi him and I see that his hand is completely dead. He has triple Miracle Fusion and Heavy Storm and no heroes. So all of his Miracle Fusions are dead and his only play is activating Heavy Storm. So that's exactly what he does. He heavies and he has to heavy there because my 0 was going to come out and passes. On my turn, I bring back Treeborn and I make a level 8. Unfortunately, the way I have to do it is a little bit awkward because of pulling into a bad combination of cards, but I make Dark End, I send, and I get in for 21. The reason why I make Dark End is because I want to quickly drain his life points before he can draw a Monarch. Then I set 2 back rows and pass. Now the reason why I set 2 back rows is because, let's say, worst case scenario, my opponent draws into Heavy Storm. The best he can do is bring back Treeborn, play heavy, get rid of my 2 back rows, and pass. And then on my turn, I can get in a lot of damage, right? Because I can banish Molly for Molly, and then attack direct for 21, right? So I have a lot of different options, and if I pull into any monsters as well, it would be game. So I'm not worried about my opponent drawing a Heavy Storm at this point. My opponent draws a Swamp Frog and recognizes immediately that that's game. So unfortunately for him, he drew kind of poorly and he wasn't able to resolve any of his Miracle Fusions. Now, game 2, I open up absolutely broken. Whenever you see Future Fusion in your opening hand, it's going to be a happy day. It's going to be a happy day. My opponent goes into the first turn Dupe Lock. And the thing about Dupe Lock is it's quite good. But Absolute Zero has many different ways that it can break it. Because for one, the deck plays triple Caius. And Caius by itself breaks up the Dupe Lock. Not to mention, I play cards like Mind Control and Brain Control. So I can Mind Control or Brain Control their Dupe Frogs and either synchro with it or activate one of my Miracle Fusions. And Miracle Fusion in itself is also an out to the Dupe Lock as well, because if I attribute the Absolute Zero, or if the 0 leaves the field by any means, then he'll trigger and wipe away both Dupe Frogs. So Dupe Lock is not too much of an issue for Absolute Zero Diva Hero to deal with. So I look at my opening hand and I begin to think, what is the best play that I can do? Now, unfortunately, I do have the Malicious in my hand, because if I didn't have the Malicious in my hand, this story would have been over a lot sooner. However, I decide to summon Diva and go for Catastor and send 2. Now here, I should not have sent the Malicious, right? Instead, I should have sent Prodigy because I already have a Malicious in my hand. The reason why I sent Malicious, to be honest with you guys, is because I might have mentioned this before. For me, these tournaments always start late at night. And even though this was an EU friendly tournament, this tournament started at midnight for me. So I had just finished downing a coffee and I was completely caffeinated. All I was thinking about was Yu-Gi-Oh, but I was really jittery, so I wasn't playing the best the first round. Anyway, I Sark and I sark for brain control. And the reason why I sark for brain control is because the only way that I lose this game is to a Vanity's Fiend. So I need to sark for an out to Vanity's Fiend to successfully summon my own Vanity's Fiend. So once again, I immediately activate Deck Devastation Virus. And my opponent's like, again, I do feel a bit bad for him, but it is what it is. However, he made a slight misplay. And the misplay was, he thought that I activated Deck Devastation Virus in the main phase, but I did not. I activated Deck Devastation Virus in the standby phase. And the reason why I activated it in the standby phase instead of the main phase is because if I wait until the main phase, my opponent has turn player priority. And the way turn player priority works in Edison format means they can take any action before I take an action, which includes summoning a monster or even activating a normal spell card. So they can take the first action at the start of each phase. So that means that if I wait until the main phase to activate Deck Devi, then my opponent can summon a Monarch. And I don't want my opponent to do something that can potentially stop me from activating Deck Devastation Virus. So I Deck Devi him in the standby phase, and because I Deck Devied him in the standby phase, that would actually mean he's able to bring back a Treeborn. But he thought it was in the main phase, so it worked out for my betterment. Because looking at the replay, we can see he has Vanity's Fiend. So I would have actually taken an extra 2,400 points of damage, but I guess because he didn't know that he has turn player priority, he chose not to bring back the Treeborn in the standby phase and summon the Vanity's Fiend. So I take 1,000 here, and I draw into Dark Arm, which is dead, because I only have 2 darks at this point, right? But looking at my hand, I'm not too worried, because I know I can easily get to a 3rd dark. So my opponent's turn, he draws. I'm able to see his draw because he's still under Deck Devi. And this is one thing that we should know about Deck Devastation Virus. It's an amazing card against frogs. However, it is best played before the opponent has access to Treeborn Frog. Because look at his hand. Deck Devi is not hitting any of these cards. The main problem cards that I need to worry about, such as Miracle Fusion or Monarchs or Vanity's Fiend, it doesn't hit those cards after Treeborn has already been sent to the grave, meaning he can easily summon these guys. So Deck Devastation Virus is really good against frogs, but just because you resolve it doesn't mean you're going to win the game. So here my opponent, he swings direct with his Vanity's Fiend, and on my turn I get the brain control. I knew once again that the only way I lose this game is due to a Vanity's Fiend. So brain control comes right on time. I brain control the Vanity's Fiend, swing direct for 24, and I sack for my Vanity's Fiend. Now at this point, there are very few outs that Aaron can actually draw to win this game. Because if he draws any Monarch, that's game. Because his hand is dead. And what I can do is even sacrifice my own Vanity's Fiend, because I know that he doesn't have Gores, right? Because he's under Deck Devi. So I can sacrifice my own Vanity's Fiend for a Caius, banish his set monster, and then drop Dark Arm, because that's 3 darks. And that'll just be GG. Well, it wouldn't be GG. He'd be at 200 life points, but the odds of him coming back would be very, very low. Okay? So, anyway, my opponent goes and he draws the perfect out. Book of Moon. And the reason why Book of Moon is the perfect out is because, you'll see, in the draw phase or standby phase, he's able to flip my Vanities down, bring back his Treeborn, sack it for Caius, banish my Vanity's Fiend, I take 1,000, pitch a frog out of his hand and attack for 34, and that's GG. So, now we're on to game 3. In game 3, I'm very happy with my hand. However, I want to pull a back row that can protect Fossil Dyna. Because Fossil Dyna generally, when you just summon it against frogs, is usually good enough to hold it down. But there are 2 problems with just summoning Fossil Dyna raw. One, if the opponent pulls into a dupe frog or substitute and you just summon Fossil Dyna raw, it's going to be difficult for you to beat over that 2000 defense without special summoning. And 2, we can see earlier that he's playing cards like Junk Synchron. So Junk Synchron has an attack of 13 and can easily run over Bossdon. Not to mention, we saw a triple Miracle Fusion, so we know that he can also pull into a Stratos and just run over Bossdon. So if I just summon Bossdon raw without any protection, it can be a little bit risky. So I want to allure into my deck and see what cards I can pull to protect Bossdon. So I allure and I don't pull anything. So I have an option at this point. I can either just pass and hope he attacks into my Gores and then drop a Bossdon, or I can just summon the Bossdon raw. Now, the thing about waiting for a Gores is it's very unlikely that the Frog player does a lot of damage the first turn, because that's generally not how the Frog deck operates. So I just decide to summon Bossdon and set Mind Crush. And that way, I can make a read on my opponent's hand and call out any card that might be detrimental to me. So my opponent goes Soul Exchange, and immediately when he goes Soul Exchange, I go Chain Mind Crush, and I call Vanity's Fiend. The reason why is because if he summons any Monarch, then it's not an issue, because I could just drop a Gores. But if he summons Vanity's Fiend makes my hand completely dead. Deck Devastation Virus, my own Vanity's Fiend, Return, Gores, all these cards don't do anything against an opposing Vanity's Fiend. So I have to call the only card that can completely wipe me out of the game. And this is something I mentioned before in my Mind Crush video. If you haven't seen it, please check it out. One of the ways that Mind Crush can be utilized is by calling the only card that you can lose to. So even if you call wrong, the hand knowledge that you get can help you to win the game. So I did call wrong, and unfortunately I had to discard my own Vanity's Fiend. But thankfully he can't attack because of Soul Exchange. I draw on the Future Fusion, which is not a bad draw, but of course it conflicts with Gores. So I need to think, what do I value? Do I value waiting 2 turns, or do I value dropping this Gores? So I decide to ultimately go for Future Fusion, because I know my opponent doesn't have an out to Absolute Zero. So I go Future Fusion and I send Mali and I send Treeborn, because my opponent's going to do everything that he can in order to stop the 0 from coming out. So after the sending 2, I pass, and he attacks the wreck for 24, and I drop down to 56. On my turn, I draw, and I draw into one of the worst possible draws. So at this point, I'm a little stressed. I'm not going to lie, because Malicious is a terrible draw, because I just sent Malicious the turn before. And another thing to keep in mind is my opponent has Brain Control. So if I keep taking damage from this Jinzo and my 0 does come out, he can just Brain Control and attack for game, and that's lethal. And Gores won't help me because I've already would have taken too much damage from the Jinzo. So I'm very stressed out, and I'm thinking about what I can do, and I realize there's nothing I can do. In hindsight, the best play would have been to not activate Future Fusion, because by taking too much damage, I can lose to his Brain Control. So at this point, I'm already committed to the Future Fusion, so I can't add another card to the field. And I just have to hope that either 1, my 0 comes out, or 2, he gets rid of the Future Fusion. So my opponent, he draws for turn and draws into a Caius, and he thinks for a second. So thankfully for me, he does not play optimally in this situation. What would have been the best play is actually just to not change the game state. So just attack over, well, not attack over, but rather attack directly with the Jinzo. And if I bring out Absolute Zero, who cares? You have Caius and Brain Control. So on your next turn, you can just Brain Control my 0, attack me direct with my 0. I've taken 24, 24, and 25. Then you can sacrifice your, or rather my 0 for Caius. And the way that would resolve is 0 would actually be Chainlink 1. and Caius would actually be chain link too. So the chain will resolve backwards, and banish, I take 1,000, and that's game, right? So you didn't actually have to commit more to the field. But thankfully, my opponent misplayed, and he summoned Caius first, right? And even if he wanted to summon Caius to prevent me from having like an absolute zero on the field, he could have attacked direct with Jinzo first and then summoned Caius. But his misplay allowed me to drop Goris. And now I'm sitting pretty with Goris and a strong token. So on my turn, I draw for turn, and I pull into Sangan. At this point, I cannot be afraid of any of his back rows. Not to mention, I know that I'm up against frogs, and generally, frogs don't have a real back row. And everything is looking good, because even though I know he has brain control, now I have deck devastation virus that I can tribute a Goris for. Because if he brain control, think about it, he's not going to brain control the Treeborn, he's not going to brain control the token, he's going to brain control the threat, which is Goris, right? So if he brain controls Goris, then I can just chain deck Devi. And even if he does brain control the token because he pulls into a Caius and he wants to banish my Goris, that's fine too, because I can still chain deck Devi, and then the Caius will have to attack the Treeborn. So anyway, I go on the offensive, and I know he has Book of Moon set because I saw his hand from when I mind crushed him earlier. So I attack direct with everything, and I don't have to worry about him activating Book of Moon, because if he books Goris, cool, you stop that attack. But you cannot book a token because tokens cannot be placed face down. So I attack direct with everything, and thankfully he takes it. I set 2 back rows and I pass. And on the end phase, he activates Dust Tornado, and he hits the card I didn't want him to hit, being deck Devi. Now my whole plan is gone. So I'm worried now because I can easily lose to this brain control right here and right now. So my opponent, he even draws a card that he can tribute the Goris with for turn. So my opponent activates brain control. I saw it coming, but there was nothing I can do because he already hit Duck Devi. He runs over the Sangan, and I search out Fossil Dyna, and he sacks for Vanity's Fiend. So this is the one time where I'm kind of like happy to see a Vanity's Fiend. So my opponent sets a back row and he ends. So once again, I cannot afford to play passive, because if I let this Vanity's Fiend just ride out, I'm going to lose. So as the situation was a turn ago, you cannot book a token. So I'm not worried about him booking my token to stop its attack. So I summon Fossil Dyna, I attack with the token, the attack goes through, and I attack direct for 12. So now I'm in a strong situation again, but my opponent draws Rhoda. So he Rhodas in the Stratos, which was an amazing draw for him. And at this point, I know what he's thinking. He's going to attack my Fossil Dyna, and then he's going to activate Super Poly using his Stratos and my Treeborn, because I saw the Super Poly from, once again, the Mind Crush. This is why, guys, Mind Crush is such a powerful card, because it gives you hand knowledge. So then he'll go for that play. Now I have a set Return, which means I can actually defend myself from the plague that I banished earlier with Allure of Darkness. And my opponent does just exactly that. And the reason why I'm completely okay with this play is because it burns his Super Poly now. And I don't want him to use Super Poly when I summon Absolute Zero to clear my own zero. So if he's going to use Super Poly, I'd rather him to get rid of this Treeborn, because I don't care about Treeborn. I can bring that back anytime. I don't want him to activate Super Poly and get rid of my own zero, because that's my power card. So he runs over my Fossil Dyna and he goes for the Absolute Zero game shot. I protect myself with Return. He doesn't attack because he doesn't want me to have Plague. I draw into Caius, which was perfect. So I Caius and I banish, get rid of his zero. I know he has Book of Moon set, and I go for Miracle Fusion. So I know that this isn't going to be a game shot, and he books. So at this situation, I am at the mercy of Aaron's top deck, because I know that he has Prodigy in his hand because he searched it with Stratos. And Zero is going to be face down due to Book of Moon. Now Zero, he's one of the most resilient broken cards in Edison format. However, if he does leave the field while face down, his effect does not resolve, right? If he gets sent back to the extra deck while face down, his effect does not resolve. So if my opponent pulls any monster like a Ryza or a Caius, it's just game. Caius is game from the burn damage. Ryza is game because Zero's effect won't resolve, so he'll just be able to get a free 24, and I'm at 450. So I'm like, well, we just got to pray to the Yu-Gi-Oh gods and hope that he doesn't pull a Monarch. So Zero gets booked. He summons Prodigy, and I sweat a bit, but then he summons Substitute, and I'm like, oh, this is not a problem. So he goes for the dupe lock. Now, as I said, Diva Hero has many different ways to break out a dupe lock. But the worst part about this dupe lock is he's getting all his bad cards out of his deck. So there's a high chance that he can draw something to get rid of my Absolute Zero. Now, as you can see from my hand, I already have an out to the dupe lock, which is Malicious. I can just sacrifice Zero and summon Malicious. That'll clear both of his dupe frogs. But the problem is, then I'll die next turn. So I can't do that. And Malicious will only do 800, so it wouldn't be game. And even Diva is a great card because I didn't pull in the Spine Gilman. But the best I can do with Diva is make a Catastor. So that doesn't do anything either, right? I can make Android and start to steadily gain life, but that doesn't do anything. The problem is this dupe lock. So my opponent draws and he passes. I draw Torrential. And when I draw Torrential, finally, I feel good. Because now I'm not worried about any Monarch, such as a Caius or something, to steal the game from me. So I draw into Torrential, I set it, I pass. My opponent draws and he passes. I draw into a dead card, Dust Shoot. Dust Shoot, generally you want to side out when you're not going first. But against decks like Frogs, they typically have a large hand size. So it's really good against this deck. My opponent draws and he sets a back row and he passes. And then finally, I pull Christmas Miracle Fusion. Now, the unfortunate part is I don't actually have any heroes in the grave. So that means in order to resolve this Miracle Fusion, I have to first sacrifice for Malicious. And the reason why I sacrifice for Malicious is because it clears his whole board. And yes, I could have summoned Diva instead, but if I went for the Diva play, then if things don't go as planned, it takes away my options for next turn. Keeping Diva in my hand is a valuable resource because I haven't pulled in the Gilman. So anyway, I sack Zero for Malicious, clear his field, then I play Miracle Fusion, banish, get Zero, attack, and it's GG. So definitely a tough first set. I would say that Diva Hero has a hard time against the Monarch deck, but I was able to pull it out. So with that, on to round two. Okay, so round two, I'm up against Berndig. Now, I unfortunately do lose the RPS. However, looking at my opening hand, it's not good, but I have 2 power cards. Well, technically 4, but I have 2 power cards that are playable, being Trap Dust Shoot and Heavy Storm. And these 2 cards are amazing to open up with together, because if you go second, generally Yu-Gi-Oh players don't like to set more than 2 back rows out of fear of Heavy Storm. So let's suppose the opponent goes set 2 back rows and then sets or summons a monster on their turn. Now, that would mean their total hand size at this point is 3 cards. So, in a perfect world, on your turn, you Heavy Storm them, get a +1, you Dust Shoot them, and then on their turn, they draw into 4 cards, and you can Dust Shoot them when they pass their turn player priority. So, Dust Shoot, Heavy Storm, an amazing combination of cards. But, back to the game at hand, my opponent, he shuffles his hand around for a bit, and he thinks about what to do. And he actually summons Fortress first turn, which is a bit of an aggressive opening. I draw my 6 card Stratos, which is absolutely needed at this point. Now, here I have an option. I can heavy his back row and then summon Stratos and run over Scrap Recycler. But I don't do that. Reason being is because Heavy Storm is such a powerful card, it's best saved when you're going for a big push. So, I just decide to summon Stratos, search out Prodigy, and run over his Scrap Recycler. Set Dust Shoot and pass. Now, upon looking at his hand, I can see that he's very weak. He has double Pot of Avarice and a Book of Moon. And with the Gore sent back, the only thing that he can do is run over Stratos. So, he runs over Stratos, I take a bit of damage, and on my turn, I draw a Caius. So I can go Special Summon Prodigy, sack the Prodigy for a Caius, and get rid of his Fortress, which is an okay play. It's okay because, one, it gets rid of the threat. However, he'll have the option to look at my hand, and then more than likely, he'll drop a power card. So, because I'm not in a threat of losing, instead of going for that play, I just decide to go for Special Summon Prodigy and sack for Malicious and pass. On the end phase, I draw into Dark Grepher, which is absolutely perfect. Of course, I would have liked something like a Diva or a Plague, but Grepher is just as good. Because with the current hand that I have now, I can easily set up a Dark Arm Dragon, and I can also send Plague to the grave with Dark Grepher's effect. So that means next turn, I can explode as long as everything goes well. My opponent's turn, he runs over my Malicious, then sets a monster and passes, and I pull into a Diva. An absolute amazing draw here. Now I have a read that his set monster is Raikou. So first I Heavy Storm to clear his back row, and then I play Mind Control. Mind Control is so busted because it's one of the few cards in the game that can interact with face down monsters. So I take his face down Raikou. I realize immediately that I have game because I can go for the Colossal Fighter Armory Arm OTK. And as soon as my opponent sees that, he immediately concedes. So on to game 2. Now game 2, I opened up absolutely broken. This hand is so good. So at this point, I can special summon Cyber Dragon, or I can normal summon Stratos. I elect to normal summon Stratos because Cyber Dragon is a power card against decks that play machine type monsters. So he's best summoned when my opponent has monsters on the field such as Machina Fortress or even Gearframe. So I summon Stratos, search out Prodigy, and then I attempt to run over his face down monster. Unfortunately for me, it was a hamster. So this means that I cannot play Future Fusion or set Mirror Force because he'll just flip up the Raikou and get rid of these cards. Now, what I should have done main phase 2 is actually activate Rhoda. Reason being, my deck only has 2 Rhoda targets, being Stratos, which I already drew into, and Dark Grepher. However, I didn't Rhoda and I just went to my end phase. So on my opponent's turn, he flips up Raikou, he clears my Stratos, and he gets in a lot of damage. This was to be expected. However, I knew that he wouldn't be able to put game on board unless he pulled absolutely broken. So I take a bit of damage, and then on my turn, I draw. And I draw into a Miracle Fusion, which is quite a good draw because I have Future Fusion. So immediately, I Rhoda, that way I can thin out the deck, and I go Future Fusion. I did not expect this play to go through. I thought my opponent would have like an MST or something to negate it, Solemn Judgment. However, I needed to play this card in order to bait out his back rows. Future Fusion was able to successfully resolve, so I sent Molly and Treeborn. Special summon Cyber, and this is exactly what I was saying earlier. Cyber is best summoned when my opponent has machine type monsters. So this Cyber Dragon is able to bait out a Bottomless. Then I special summon Prodigy. The reason why I special summon Prodigy and then play Miracle Fusion is because I don't want to banish the Malicious with Miracle Fusion, right? Now, of course, I could have also banished the Stratos as well, but I wanted to bait out as many of his back rows as possible before summoning Vanity's Fiend. So he did think about potentially activating a back row on Prodigy, but he passed priority, so I decided to activate Miracle Fusion. And this Miracle Fusion was too much for him to deal with, so he activated Solemn, which I was completely okay with because I still had an out to his board. So I sacked the Prodigy for Vanity's Fiend, and with Vanity's Fiend I'm able to get in a lot of good chip damage by attacking over the Raikou. So I attack over Raikou, and that drops him down to 18 and sat Mirror Force. So I'm sitting very comfortably right now. My opponent activates Pot of Avarice, which is a really good draw for him, especially in this situation because he needs a way to get rid of my back rows. He attempts to run over Vanity's Fiend, but I flip up Mirror Force. And on my turn, I draw Smashing Ground. So I take a second to think, and I check his life points. Now, at this point, I'm thinking the only way that he can win is actually Brain Control. He needs a Brain Control. So assuming that his face-down monster is a Raikou, I play Smashing Ground, and then Vanity's Fiend will attack his set monster. If it's Raikou, he has to hit the Vanity's Fiend, or else he'll lose. Which means Greffer can get a direct attack in, and I would drop him down to 100. So I play Smashing Ground, kill his hamster, Vanity's runs over his set monster, which was best case scenario for me. It wasn't a Raikou, but rather a hamster. And he can't special summon because I have Vanities. So I swing direct for 17, and had he had Raikou face down, he would actually be in a good situation because we can see in this replay that he had Gores. So I attack direct for 17, it drops him down to 100, he draws for turn, bottomless, and realizes he can't win. So round 2, good games to Berndig, and on to the next, round 3. Okay, so round 3, I'm up against Bossdon. The only boss I know is Rick Ross. Boss. Anyway, so I'm up against Bossdon, and I do lose the RPS yet again. Now, I lure away the Prodigy, and I look at my hand, and I recognize that I have the Diva Hero OTK. For those of you who are unfamiliar what I mean when I say the Diva Hero OTK, what that is essentially summoning a level 6, a level 8, and absolute 0 all on the same turn and doing over 8,000 points of damage. So in order to do the Diva Hero OTK with this hand, all I have to do is summon Stratos, and if Stratos lives, on my next turn I can make Bionic a level 8 and 0 and it'll be game. So I go for that play. I summon Stratos, search out Malicious, and I Sark for Brain Control. Set a back row, Mirror Force, and pass. The reason why I don't attack the face down monster is because if it's a hamster, he can get a Raikou, and that'll stop the Diva Hero OTK. And if it's a Raikou, then that's unfortunate. The reason why I actually Sark for Brain Control out of any card in my deck is because most decks have level 4 monsters. And all I need for this Diva Hero OTK is a level 4 monster. That way I can make Bionic. And I have Heavy Storm in my hand as well, so I'm not worried about any back row. So I don't attack into his face down monster, and I just pass. Now, on my opponent's turn, he goes Summon Greffer, and he pitches Vayu Sirocco, makes Armwing, and I'm just like, I'm not going to have any of that, and I Mirror Force him. He passes, and with that, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Diva Hero OTK. Heavy as back row, make Bionic, pitch, return, make a level 8, make Colossal, make 0, and that's game. Poor Bossdon. So at this point, actually, it's not clear whether he's playing Black Wings or Vayu Turbo. So on my turn, I draw, and I think about how to best counter his opening, which was the standard Greffer, send Vayu Sirocco, set a back row, pass. Now I have two plays at this point. I can either summon Diva and go for a Catastor or Android, or summon Stratos. I decide to summon Stratos because with Stratos I could search out the evil guy, and with Evil Hero Infernal Prodigy, that'll set up my next turn because I'll have an option to go into Prodigy Diva or Prodigy Caius. And with Dark Greffer, you don't want to leave that guy on the field, especially against Vayu Turbo decks, because all they're going to keep doing is fueling up their graveyard, and it's going to get worse and worse for you. So I summon Stratos, I add Prodigy, I attempt to run over his Greffer, but unfortunately for me, he deprisons. He summons Gale. I try to make him think that I have Gores by hitting the Thinking Face, but even in this case, Gores is not very good because he has Gale, so he could just half the Gores. He attacks direct with both, makes Armor Master, sets a back row, and pass. Now, my turn. I have two different plays. Prodigy into Caius or Prodigy into Diva. But I have to think about the status of the game. Because this is game 2/3, these are sided games. And in sided games, people like to side in cards like Pulling the Rug. So if I go Special Prodigy and attack Caius and my opponent flips up a Pulling the Rug, I lose. Because I'm at 5,000, he has an Armor Master on the field, And look at his graveyard, right? His graveyard set up. If he has any monster, then it's just simply game. So I can't afford to go for Caius because it's too risky. So I need to go for the Prodigy into Diva play because at least that'll make my Miracle Fusion live. And if my opponent has Royal Oppression, we just go to game 3. So I special summon Prodigy. He says okay. I go Diva and I go into Black Rose. He solemns the Black Rose, which I was 100% okay with because now I can get in a lot of damage. So I summon Absolute Zero, and of course I could have crashed. And even though Armor Master can't die by battle, this is a real Armor Master, Absolute Zero's effect would kill it. But he's at 4,000, so I want to get his life points as low as possible. So I banish my Zero, I banish Spine Gilman, and I attack direct for 25. And that puts him down to 15. My opponent's turn, he draws, and he summons his Silverwind. His Silverwind runs over my Absolute Zero. I take 300. I take a look at my opening hand, and I'm like, well, that's just game. Pitch Dark Arms, special summon Greffer, sack Greffer for Caius, banish, he takes 1,000, and attack for game. I said GG, and he just left. He didn't wish me GG. You know, I was kind of sad about that, but anyway, that's it. Round 3. Okay, round 4. I'm up against ELLIONEL, and I apologize if I'm butchering your name. He actually sent me a DM before we had our tournament set, and he said he's scared. So I guess he's a fan. Anyway, for the RPS, I do unfortunately lose the RPS yet again. And I take a look at my opening hand. It's not the best, but it's good enough going second. Because if my opponent sets a monster, then obviously I go Prodigy into Caius, and that essentially steals going first away from my opponent. But he just sets a back row and he passes. I draw on the Deck Devastation Virus, which is absolutely amazing, but I decide to just set Dust Tornado and pass. End phase, he MSTs it, he thinks about what to do, and he just passes, and I draw into Dust Shoot, which was absolutely perfect, because now I can see what's going on and why he's not making any plays. So I set Dust Shoot and I pass. I look at his opening hand, and there's two options here. I can either choose to Dust Shoot away his Gores or his Machina Fortress. Now, the thing about Gores is a card you have to play into. So keep that in mind when you Dust Shoot Gores. However, I realized that if he pulls into a gear frame, then I'm not actually too worried about dealing with a Machina Fortress because I have Caius. So I can easily just Caius away the Fortress. And I'm looking at his hand, he doesn't have Heavy Storm. So worst comes to worst, I can just Caius, banish the Fortress, all the cards in my hand, I can set them, and it's not a big deal dealing with a Fortress. At this point in time, it's much easier for my hand to deal with a Fortress than it is to deal with a Gores. So I send back the Gores, and he's just forced to pass. I draw on a Gold Sark, which is perfect because now I can Sark for Future Fusion, and I pass. His turn, he thinks about what to do again. He just sets a whole bunch of back rows because at this point, he's not trying to summon Gores anymore. So I know that he has Starlight Road, so my Heavy Storm's kind of dead. So I think about what to do, and I special summon Prodigy, and I ask him if it's okay. And he thinks, and he flips up Torrential. Now, I definitely understand why he has activated Torrential, because for those of you who have been following me, you know that I have been known to snipe out Starlight Road with Prodigy Caius. It happened when I was streaming with Keegan in the most recent video that he featured me on his channel. The guy had 4 set back rows, and I went special summon Prodigy and like hit the Starlight Road and Heavy Stormed them. And it happened at my latest tournament run, the one before this at Peak of the Peak 3. I was up against Livid, and he had 4 back rows, and I did this exact same play. Special summon Prodigy, sack for Caius, and I hit the Starlight Road, and then I dropped Heavy Storm. So it's just like, this guy saw it coming from a mile away, so he just decided to torrential the Prodigy. So in my mind, I'm thinking, good Prodigy, good Prodigy. So I summon Diva, and Diva, I go into Gilman, and I make Catastor, and I'm hoping that he activates Mirror Force, because if he does, I will chain Deck Devastation Virus, but he actually does not activate Mirror Force. So I'm like, okay, that's fine. I know he has Brain Control as well, so if he Brain Controls, I'll activate Deck Devi there too. So on his turn, he thinks about what to do. I get a Future Fusion, and I think about what to do because this hand is really good. Not to mention, with this hand, I can actually go for game. So I can't activate Heavy Storm once again because I know he has Starlight Road. So what I decide to do is go Future Fusion. I go Future Fusion, banish, sack for Malicious, hit his monster, and I'm going for the game shot. Because in my mind, if my opponent had Mirror Force, he would have used it last turn on the Catastor. So I go for the game shot, but unfortunately for me, he does indeed have the Mirror Force. So I chain Deck Devi and I'm able to look at his hand, but there's no denying I am in a terrible situation right now. From being in complete control to completely on the defensive, all because of a well-played Mirror Force by my opponent. So he draws into charge, he gets some damage in, and he switches, which works out for me because now that essentially will make my Gores live. And I draw, I think about what to do, I bring back Treeborn, and I simply just pass. He sacks for Caius. Caius is away my Treeborn, but I had to summon Treeborn. The reason why I had to summon Treeborn is because, let's just say I passed and I didn't bring back Treeborn. That is a 100% dead giveaway that I have Gores. At least by putting Treeborn on the field, it incentivizes my opponent to summon their Caius. And hopefully, he'll be greedy enough to even go for an attack. And he did. Not only with just the Caius, but also the Fortress. So he attacks direct with both, and I'm able to drop Gores along with a big token. Now, on my turn, I know his back row is Starlight Road, so this Heavy Storm, there's no point in activating it because it's useless. I pulled into Caius, which was an amazing draw. So what I do is I set both of my back rows and I set the sacrifice the token for Caius, because when you target Fortress, he's able to hit a card out of your hand. So by playing it this way, he won't be able to hit any of the cards on my hand. So I'm able to banish his Fortress and run over his Caius with Gores and attack direct for 24. And now I'm once again in a great position. He's still under Deck Devi, and fortunately for me, his Raikou instantly gets sent to the grave. So he activates Pot of Avarice because he doesn't have a choice. If he brain controls my Gores and he runs over my Caius, then that'll drop him under 2,400 life points. And on my next turn, I'll just attack direct for game. So with his Pot of Avarice, he pulls into Trap Dust Shoot, which is dead. I have no cards in my hand, and a Fortress, which he cannot summon. So he takes a second to think, and then he realizes that that's just game. So on to game 2. Now, game 2, I take a look at my opening hand, and it's very good, right? I have Gilman, but I've already explained that drawing the Gilman is not that bad. So his opening hand, he goes set 3 back rows. That's absolutely wild. And look, these 3 back rows are some good back rows. So I think about what I can do and how I can bait out all of these back rows. So the easiest thing is summon Spine Gilman, but he goes bottomless. And that was a really good bottomless because that's my only water. But I wasn't worried about the time about losing Spine Gilman because I have Future Fusion. So at this point, I'm thinking, okay, should I activate Future Fusion now, or should I wait 1 turn and activate Future Fusion later? The reason why waiting 1 turn could be good is because I can go summon Grepher, pitch Malicious, pitch Plague, and then essentially make a Stardust first before activating the Future Fusion, right? But the reason why I decided to not go for that play is because you have to realize the deck that you're up against. While summoning Stardust and activating Future Fusion and then playing Miracle Fusion sounds nice, the problem is my monsters, both Zero and Stardust, have an attack of 25, which means if he has Machina Fortress, he can either ram into Stardust or ram into Zero, it doesn't matter, and then get rid of my whole field, just like that. Except for Grepher, right? But I lose my power cards. I lose both my Stardust and my Zero. So with that into consideration, there's no reason to wait before activating Future Fusion. So I activate Future Fusion, and unfortunately for me, he has MST. So now I'm not in a good spot. So I just am forced to pass. He summons his Fortress, and he goes for 2 aggressive attacks. On my turn, I draw a Miracle Fusion, which is completely dead. And now I have to think about what plays I can do. So I have 2 options here. I can either make a level 8 or a level 6. And if I'm going to make a level 8, the level 8 that I'm going to make is Dark End. And if I'm going to make a level 6, the level 6 I'm going to make is Brio. And the reason why I would make Brio is because Bionic is a water. And it would turn my Miracle Fusion on. It would make it live. The problem is, look at my hand. It's not good at all. So let's say that I do indeed go for the Bionic play. So I pitch Molly, I send Plague, and I stack a card. Let's say I stack Vanity's Fiend, right? And now I Synchro and I make Bionic. And in my hand, I have now double Miracle Fusion with a Bionic. I activate a Miracle Fusion, I banish Bionic, and I banish the Malicious in my grave, and I make 0. Now this Malicious that I just banished is a live Malicious because I haven't used this effect yet, right? So I lose Malicious essentially for the rest of the game, and now I have 0. So I have 0 on the board, and I can't even activate my other Miracle Fusion because I don't have additional targets. So if I go 0, crash into his fortress, like yes, I clear his field, but like all I'm left with is a Vanity's Fiend. Like that's it. So making Bionic, even though it seems good because it would turn on my Miracle Fusion, essentially it makes this hand unplayable once Absolute Zero leaves the field. So I decide to go for Dark End because let's say I make Dark End here, right? Then I can set both of my Miracle Fusions. I can Dark End, send his Machina Fortress, Dark End, run over his Lila, and attack direct with Dark Grepher. And then at any point in time, if I pull any water like a Diva, then both of the Miracle Fusions become live and I'm in a really strong situation. So I make Dark End and my opponent flips up Solemn Judgment. And the moment he does that, I realize it's over. Like this game is done. But I don't want to scoop because it's tournament, so I run over the Lila, I set a back row to try to see what he does. He heavies my Miracle Fusion, so it's just like insult to injury. Like I knew I already lost, and like to lose a Miracle Fusion that way just didn't feel good. He summons Gear Frame and I just concede. So now we're on to game 3. Now game 3, this is a very good hand. So I just decide to set Sangan and pass. So he summons his Gear Frame and he runs over my Sangan and I search out the evil guy. That way I have access to both my hero and my water. Now what I could have done instead was first turn I could have made Catastor. But even though Catastor is really good against the Machina deck, if you just summon him raw, you don't know how that guy is going to get outed. They could have Cyber Dragon, they could have Book of Moon, they could have Smashing Ground. So it's not good to just raw summon a Catastor. And look, I have no back rows either. So that's why I chose not to summon Diva first turn. Now, on his go, he actually doesn't set any back rows, right? So I think about what to do with this hand, and I lure, and I banish the Plague. I don't banish Prodigy because, once again, I need a hero and a water. So I think about what to do here, and I realize that I have game. So I keep the Cyber Dragon just in case things don't go as planned. So I go for the game shot. I make Army Arm, I Brain Control, I summon Zero, and if every one of these attacks go through, then it's game. But of course, my opponent had Gores. So when I attack direct with 18 Army Arm, he drops the Gores immediately. Now here I'm able to run over the Gores because Absolute Zero is at 3k. And main phase 2, I think. And this is where I made a crucial misplay. What I should have done right here, main phase 2, is actually activate Gear Frame's effect, because he can actually equip to any machine type monster, and Army Arm is a machine. So all I had to do was activate Army Arm's effect, activate Gear Frame's effect, equip it to Army Arm, and then equip Army Arm to Spine Gilman. And then what happens to Gear Frame? He just goes to the grave. He just falls off. So now on my field, I would have Spine Gilman with an Army Arm and 0. So it's a really strong field, and it's difficult for him to out with a Fortress, because if he goes Fortress attack 0, then 0's at 3,000. So that means that his Fortress will have to choose between killing the 0 or the Spine Gilman. And if he goes Fortress Attack Spawn Gilman, well, Spawn Gilman's at 27. So he's going to take a lot of damage because of the Armor on Burn. So it puts him in a really awkward situation had I played this turn correctly. So anyway, I pass him back his gear frame, and that wound up costing me. So he Book of Moons my Gilman, and then he runs over my Gilman, and he attacks. And here, the reason why the Fortress dies, because 1, it dies by battle, and then 2, it dies from the effect. So even though this is attached to him, his board is clear. On my go, I draw, and my hand's actually quite good. There are a lot of plays that I can do. I can go Special Cyber Dragon, Summon 0, like there's a lot of things that I can do. However, you have to recognize when to go for a push. And if I go for a push at this instant, then it easily gets outed by a Fortress or by a set Raikou or even by a Hamster. So I elect to not do anything and wait until he commits to the field first. Plus I'm at 72, so the odds of me dying from 72 are very unlikely. So my opponent finally decides to commit to the field. He attacks direct with 25, and I draw for turn. And now finally, that's what I was waiting for him to commit something to the field. So I contact Fuse, I summon Greffer, and I summon 0, and I just decide to put everything in. Reason being, Gores is gone. I don't have to worry about Gores. So this is my second push. So I attack with 0 because if he does have Raikou, it puts him in an awkward spot to kill Raikou, to kill 0, because he will take a lot of damage. This is 37. That's a lot of damage. So I attack direct with 0, and then he kills Fortress, which is a win for me because I don't care about Fortress. He mills 3. I attack direct for 17, and I set Mirror Force. So once again, I'm in a strong situation because even if he does manage to summon a Fortress, I'm just going to Mirror Force. He does have the Heavy Storm, which is a bit unfortunate, and he has the Kaiko to run over my Greffer and banish a card from the grave. So here I look at my hand and I think about what the best play to do is. Okay, I don't have a way to go for the game shot, but I have two options. I can either activate Smash and Ground and attack him direct for 25, or I can just sacrifice the 0 for Vanity Fiend. Because if I do that, it clears his guy, and I don't have to worry about brain control. But ultimately, I decide to go for this play. I Smash and Ground, and I attack direct for 25. And I don't summon Vanity's Fiend. The reason being is because this deck that he's playing has a lot of flip effect monsters, such as Raikou and Hamster. So let's say that I summon Vanity's Fiend now. On his turn, if he draws into a Raikou, then my Vanity's Fiend will be forced to attack his face down Raikou, and then Vanity's Fiend will get sent to the grave, and I lose my chance at winning. So on his turn, he does indeed draw into a monster that he sets. He drew into Card Trooper, but I didn't even know what it was at the time because when he entered an end phase, I just revealed the Vanity's Fiend, and he just conceded. Because it doesn't matter what that set monster is, 0 is going to blow it up, and then Vanity's Fiend is going to prevent him from special summoning. He's at 300, so that's it. That's the game. So definitely a good set. I really enjoyed it, and that's it this round. On to the next. Okay, so on to round 5, and now I'm up against Dan Top Deck Team. So I surely hope that he doesn't just top deck out of me. I do win the RPS for once, but my opening hand is not that strong. So I set Bottomless and I pass. My opponent is on Vayu Turbo or Black Wings, and he attacks direct with Greffer. I take 17, he sets a back row and passes. On my turn, I lure and I banish the Greffer. Reason being is because I have Mind Control Diva, which is really, really good. Not to mention I also have the MST. So I MST, hit the prison, I go Mind Control, and because I'm also playing Malicious, I send my Caius, send my Malicious, and I just decide to go for a lot of damage. I'm like, the only way that he breaks this board is with Brain Control. If he doesn't have Brain Control, there's no way he's getting past a level 6 and a Stardust behind 2 Bottomlesses and a Mirror Force. Like, it's just not going to happen. And I'm not worried about Goris either because I have Mirror Force. So I go for big damage, and my opponent goes Summon Sirocco, Bottomless. He goes Summon another Black Wing, Bottomless. He goes Burial, he brings back a guy, and he specials Gale, he has my Goyu, He attacks, and I go Mirror Force, and that's it. Like, it's impossible to get past that field if you didn't have brain control. So, on to the next game. Now, this hand is also really good, and he opens up the typical Vayu Turbo hand, right? So he sends Necro, he sends Vayu, he sets up back row, and passes. So looking at my hand, it's quite good. So I Rhoda for Stratos, and Stratos, I add Malicious. The reason why I add Malicious here is because this sets up for a level 8 Synchro in 2 turns. It's a bit slow, but it's what I have to work with. So I Gold Sark, and I Gold Sark for Diva. The reason why I Sark for Diva is because I want to turn on my Miracle Fusion. Even though I already have the Plague, still I need my Miracle Fusions to be live. And generally I Sark for Future Fusion. But the reason why I Sarking for Future Fusion in this case is not good is because the best card to send in the deck with Future Fusion is Malicious. And I already have Malicious in my hand. So I Sark for Diva, and I set Mirror Force, and I pass. He summons a guy, he attacks with both, and I Mirror Force, because that's too much damage to take from Vayu Turbo, because at any point in time, the deck can just kill you. He sets a back row, he passes. I summon Prodigy, and I sack for Malicious, because once again, I'm getting Diva next turn, and I want to be able to put on as much damage as possible. If he runs over this Malicious, it's not a big deal, because I can still make a level 8 Synchro with it. And if he doesn't run over this Malicious, I'm going to make 2 level 8 Synchros, plus have access to an Absolute Zero. So during my end phase, I draw a Gold Sark from Prodigy's effect. On his turn, he summons Arm Ring, he runs over my Malicious, I take some damage, and then I draw Nobleman and get my Diva from Gold Sark. So at this point in time, I'm thinking about what the best course of action is. So I decide ultimately to make Stardust behind Spine Gilman. And I'm actually surprised that all of these plays are going through. I thought my opponent would have something like Royal Oppression, but he had nothing. So I Sark, not Sark rather, I activate Miracle Fusion. So I played Sark by accident, but I wanted to activate Miracle Fusion because you saw I was banishing the cards in my graveyard. So I activate Miracle Fusion, and now I just have a huge board of monsters. And this is why I Sark for Diva. And I begin to go on the offensive. Attack with 0, he takes some damage. Attack direct with Gilman, he takes 17, and attack with Stardust, and he prisons. Now, usually, I would not attack with Stardust in that situation because I want to keep Stardust on the field because he's such a powerful card. However, I had Gold Sark in my hand. So I'm thinking, well, I'm just going to Gold Sark for return. So this is not the last time you're going to see Stardust this duel. So I do indeed Sark for return, and I pass. And in my head, I'm thinking I'm in a strong situation. Because if my opponent sets anything, he's getting crossed out. And if he doesn't set anything and he just summons a bunch of monsters, 0 is going to hold it down. So my opponent just actually passes, which was a little strange, right? So he passes and I attack, and then he activates Mirror Force. Now that makes sense. At the time, I didn't have a read that he had Mirror Force, but it makes sense. The reason why he didn't activate Mirror Force previously is because I had a Stardust on the field. But now that Stardust was gone because of D-Prison, that's exactly why he was able to activate Mirror Force. So in that situation, of course, I should have switched 0 to defense and attacked direct with Spine Gilman. So now I activate Future Fusion. I send a hero and a water, sending Treeborn. He attacks with Greffer. I finally get my return, and my return is my win condition. So I summon Greffer and I pass. And he Gardenas. And this is what I was saying earlier. Leaving Greffer on the field is not good against the Vayu Turbo deck. Because with that card, they can just explode. So I set return, and I pass, and he draws into Vayu. He activates the effect. He goes Caius, targets a card, activate return, and when he shows me the Solemn, like that's it. He has so much damage that he can do at this point. Like that's the game. So unfortunate, my return didn't have an opportunity to resolve. So now we're on to game 3. In game 3, I finally pull into my side deck cards, Royal Decree. This is actually the first time that I'm playing Royal Decree in tournament. And the reason why I'm playing Royal Decree is because actually I play Yu-Gi-Oh! A lot with some of my best friends. And my best friends, while they might not be as competitive as me, they're still really good in terms of a second mind because they can show me things that I might not see. And when we were playing our like fun sets, he was completely destroying me with Vayu Turbo. And the reason why he kept winning was because of Royal Oppression. And also, he's a good player as well. Now, I have been complaining about Royal Oppression for the longest time. But I had to begin to think, instead of complaining about Royal Oppression, what can I do to prevent getting Royal Oppression? So I'm like, well, how about I just play Royal Decree? And we'll see whose Royal Decree reigns supreme. So that's why I decided to put in Royal Decree in the deck. So I open up Double Gold Sark, which is very, very good. So I Sark for a tuner and Future Fusion. That way I have access to a level 8 in 2 turns. I set Decree, I set Treeborn, and I pass. So my opponent goes, he summons a guy, he attacks, he sets 2, and then I flip up Decree. And even though he gave me a thumbs up here, I knew he was not happy about that at all. I draw for turn. He immediately activates DD Crow. So I thought that was a bit of a strange play because I actually cannot bring back Treeborn because I have Royal Decree. So I'm thinking, oh, okay, maybe he did that because he wants to fuel his Dark Arm, right? A Dark Arm Dragon would definitely put me in a tight spot. So anyway, he immediately crows to Treeborn, and I Rhoda into Stratos, and I add Prodigy. I run over his Armageddonite, so now I have a read that he has Dark Arm because he activated Crow preemptively for no reason at all. So on his turn, the first thing I do is I Crow his Vayu because I don't want him to drop Dark Arm. If he drops Dark Arm, I lose. Like, this doesn't do anything against a Dark Arm. So my opponent, he thinks for a second, he sets a monster and he passes. And now I get my 2 cards off of Gold Sark. I do also draw the other Diva, which is a bit unfortunate, but it's not the end of the world because I haven't pulled into Spine Gilman yet. So I go for big damage. Banish Malicious, not banish, but send Malicious. And the reason why I had to send Spine Gilman is because that's 3 Divas. Bang, bang, bang. That was my only water target left. So, you know, it goes back to what I was saying. Like, yes, I didn't pull in Spine Gilman yet, but it was also just a terrible draw because now I have to send Spine Gilman with Future Fusion, or I won't be able to go for the double Diva play right now. So I go for the double Diva play. I make Stardust and make Brio, and he's in a spot where if he does not draw like Brain Control, he loses because it's really hard to out Stardust and Brio without the use of traps, because Stardust usually can handle most monster effects. So I attack direct with both. He takes 48 and he drops really low, and he goes Rhoda, which was a really good draw for him because he's able to summon a Caius. Caius banishing my Stardust and running over my Brio, and he's at 28. So that puts me in an awkward situation because once again I had to send the Gilman with Future Fusion. Not to mention I used all 3 of my Divas. So my hand right now can only make a level 4, right? I can go Special Summon Prodigy, Normal Summon Diva, make a level 4, but that doesn't do anything. And unbeknownst to me, my opponent actually has Fossil Dyna in his hand, which means if I won't have an opportunity to summon Absolute Zero. So anyway, he runs over my Brio and I draw for turn, Caius. Oh, my deck. My deck just said, a true hero. Believe in the power of a hero. So that's just game, right? Because we know that both of these back rows are dead because of Decree. So I Special Summon Prodigy, I sack for Caius, and he just quits. He just quits. I wish him GG anyway, so hopefully he'll watch this analysis and he'll see that, you know, I'm a fair sport. But anyway, that's it, guys, for round 5. On to the next, round 6. Okay, so round 6, I'm up against a very, very exceptional duelist, Beast Mode. For those of you who don't know, Beast Mode is known for being very proficient with the zombie deck. And we've actually played a few times before, but never in a tournament setting. The very first time I had an encounter with Beast Mode was actually when I was recording one of my YouTube videos when I was playing X-Sabers. And even from that set, I could tell that Beast Mode knows how to play Yu-Gi-Oh! He is very good at this game. And the reason why this set is so important is because winner of this gets top 8 on the winner's side. So at this point, both me and Beast Mode are undefeated. We haven't lost yet. So let the games begin. Now, fortunately for me, I do win the RPS. And I take a look at my opening hand, and it's really good. It's really, really good. So obviously, I Sark for Future Fusion, set Mirror Force, and I pass. So I already know he's on zombies because he's Beast Mode, and he already knows that I'm on Diva Hero because I'm a true hero. So he sets 2 back rows, sets a monster, and he passes. I pull in the Gorus, but there's nothing I can really do, so I just pass. And now I finally draw into Future Fusion, right? Beast Mode draws, he passes, and I draw into Future Fusion. I get it off Gold Sark. So at this point, I take a look at my opening hand, and I'm like, I have game. This hand is game if my opponent has a level 4 monster set, such as a Goblin Zombie, right? Because it's the Diva Hero OTK, which I explained to you guys before. Basically, the Diva Hero OTK is a level 6, a level 8, and absolute 0 all in the same turn. So I go Heavy Storm, and he Solemns. But I can't not go for game. So I go Future Fusion, I send 2, and I go Mind Control. And to my surprise, it was a Necrogardna. Now, the reason why Necrogardna is a terrible card to Mind Control is because I can't Synchro Summon with it. If I Synchro Summon with his Necrogardna and I attempt to go for game, then he can just Gardna one of the attacks. So I summon Diva, I get Spine Gilman, I flip up his guy, and I make Stardust. And when Stardust is successful, I'm like, oh, this is it. But he bottomlesses. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm not worried about bottomless because I have Miracle Fusion. So I tribute to negate, I play Miracle Fusion, summon 0, attack, and that's just game because 0's at 3,000. So not a bad game 1. Now, game 2. I look at my opening hand and it's once again quite good. But this time, Beast Mode is sitting pretty behind 3 back rows. So I go summon Diva and I get Spine Gilman and he says okay. So I don't want to make a synchro here because I have a read that he has bottomless. So instead I just go Gilman attack his Goblin Zombie. The attack goes through, he searches out Ill Blood, and I attack direct with Diva and he takes 600 and I set 2. So at this point I'm feeling pretty confident because 1, I have a read that he has bottomless, so he can't bottomless any of my guys, and 2, I know he has Ill Blood in his hand, so I can just Mind Crush his Ill Blood. But on his end phase Dust Tornado, he does hit my Mind Crush, which is a bit unfortunate. So he draws for turn, and he activates Allure. Now, guys, imagine if I Mind Crushed his Ill Blood. Then he wouldn't have even activated Allure, because it would have been a blind Allure, right? So it's unfortunate that he did hit the right card, but he allures, he banishes the Ill Blood anyway, and then he decides to summon Tomato. So I have a MST set which doesn't do much. So my Diva just dies. Now once again, I have a read that one of these back rows is a bottomless. So I go a blind MST and I roll a die, evens and odds, and I hit one of his back rows, which is Starlight Road. So when I saw that, I'm just like, ugh, I hit the wrong one. Because whatever that other back row is, that's the real back row. But I still have to go for my play. So I sack Gilman, I go for Vanity's Fiend, and he Torrentials. And guys, just imagine, right? If I called correctly with the MST, and I hit his Torrential, then now he has a Tomato and a Road. And then Vanity's Fiend runs over his Tomato, and look at his hand. It doesn't do anything. So sometimes Yu-Gi-Oh comes down to the 50-50, right? Beast Mode was able to hit my face down Mind Crush, which was really good. And I missed his Torrential, which was also really good for him. So things weren't quite going well for your boy game 2. So I set return because I don't want him to think that I'm just free. He summons a guy and I draw into Mind Control. So this is actually really good because now I don't have to worry about attacking and getting him a free search out of his deck. So I go Diva into Diva, right? I don't have much of a choice because I've already used Gilman. Now, of course, one option is to not go Diva into Diva and just go Diva and make a level 6. But my reasoning is this. I wanted to get the second Diva because if he has brain control, my level 6 synchro is gone anyway. But if he doesn't have brain control, then if he sets a monster, I can synchro next turn into another level synchro with Dark Grepher. So I decided to go for that play because I was like, the level 6 gets outed either way with brain control. And I make Goyu. And I attack direct for 28. And on his turn, he Book of Lives. He brings back Goblin Zombie, and he does indeed have the brain control. And I was just like, well, that's unfortunate. And you guys, you know how this story goes, right? Whenever zombie players summon a Brionic, then they're going to win. So he summons his Brionic, he pitches the Mizuki, he returns, attacks direct for 23. Beast mode, once again, a very, very good Yu-Gi-Oh player because look at my graveyard, guys. He chose to banish the perfect card because your average duelist, they would have banished like a Diva, right? And imagine if Beast mode banished Diva. Then I can actually activate this return, and then I can summon this Grepher, and there's a potential chance for a comeback, right? The problem is that Beast mode he's very good. He's very, very good at this game. So because he chose the right card, I was not able to make Goyu again because I could have made Goyu and then cracked and stole and then like pitched a card, and it would have got really bad. But he played correctly. I run over his face down, and it's a turtle. He gets Zombie Master, and at this point, I'm just playing just to play. Like, I know the game's over. He returns my card, and he runs over, and I'm just trying to pretend like I have something, but like, I know I don't have anything. And I just decide to concede. Like, I just realize I'm wasting this man's time. Now, game 3, look at this opening hand. It's like, this is one of those hands that like, you picked. Like, you ever remember back in the day, like when you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And like you pick your opening 6 cards and you're like, guys, imagine if I opened up like this. Well, this was a hand that I literally picked. Like it has everything. It has everything. So first of all, I wrote it for Stratos just to thin out the deck. Even though I don't plan on summoning Stratos, I need to thin out the deck because I only have 2 targets. So I wrote it for Stratos, and I Future Fusion, I send Molly, send Treeborn, and I Synchro, and I make Dark End, and immediately, I deck Devi him. Because think about how the zombie deck works. They play a lot of cards like Sangan and Goblin Zombie, and if those cards hit the field and you deck Devi them afterwards, they get a search. So I deck Devi him immediately. And look, a deck Devi for 5. He lost, oh sorry, not 5, for 4. He lost 4 cards right away. And this deck Devi gave me 3 darks. It gave me 3 darks. So I just already knew like this game is over, right? He has a lure, which is dead. He can't play it. And he has D Prison, which is dead because I have Dark Arm. And then he just like, you know, he sees the Dark Arm. I hit the D Prison. And at this point, the only way that he can win is if he pulls the Dark Arm, because he can easily banish and then pull Dark Arm, or if he pulls into Brain Control, right? So anyway, to prevent, you know, him having plays with like Plague Spreader, right? I make Android and I search out a DD Crow, and even he realizes that, well, like I guess I just lose, right? So now I don't even have to worry about Dark Arm. And if he does draw a Dark Arm, I'm going to know it because he's under Deck Devi. So that means now the only card that I was worried about, Dark Arm, is gone. The only way he can win is Deck Devi. I mean, not Deck Devi, sorry, Brain Control. So I attack direct with both. He does Gardener the Dark Arm, so he only takes 24. And on his turn, he draws, you guessed it, Brain Control. So I was very annoyed. And actually, I was so annoyed that I didn't even gain the 600 from Android. But anyway, he Brain Controls my Dark Arm. He runs over my Android. I take some damage. He Dark Arms and he clears the field. Thankfully, I did have Stratos, as you know. So I'm able to just attack, and I have Torrential and still have DD Crow. So I'm still in like such a strong position, and Beast Mode only has a lure. He draws in the Plague, and Plague dies. I'm not in a position where I can actually do 3,000, so I just keep beating him down with Stratos. I set Mirror Force too because like he's not, if he draws in a heavy storm, he loses, right? So he draws Dark Arm. We were just talking about that guy, but he only has 2 darks. So he's forced to allure the Dark Arm. He pulls 2 back rows, he sets them both, and I just attack the game, and that's it. Definitely unfortunate. I do feel bad about our set with Beast Mode because once again, he's a very, very talented duelist, and even he gave me a shout out. He basically gave a prediction that I would come in top 8 for this tournament, and the prediction came true. So I'm looking forward to our next set, Beast Mode, but until next time. Anyway, that was it, and as you can see, I went undefeated. So I managed to get into winner side top 8 without losing a single set. Someone say, a true hero, how do you do it? How do you do it? That's my secret. Anyway, on to the next top 8. Okay, so this is the first set of winner side top 8, and I'm up against Dottau, otherwise known as Dimitri, who is a very talented duelist and has topped a few of these events before. So his opening is quite weak, and he allures his Bora and sets of back row and passes. But looking at my opening hand, it's not too strong as well, but I do have a lot of really good trap cards. So I MST his back row, summon Diva, and I make Android. Now, some people have asked me why I don't play the level 5 water monster because I'm playing Absolute Zero. And there are 2 reasons. One, most importantly, the card sucks. It doesn't do anything. Like, the odds of him going up to 3,000 are very low. Not to mention, Android is stronger. She can crash out with a Monarch. And if you're up against a rogue deck, such as a Berndig, you're going to want to have Magical Android in your extra deck. Because even though it seems very trivial, gaining 600 life points during the end phase, it does indeed add up. Not to mention, I play Thought Ruler, which means during the end phase, I would actually gain 1,200 points of life points each turn. And Thought Ruler's effect also applies to Magical Android as well. So she cannot be targeted if I pay 1,000. So this is why I actually play Android over that level 5 monster. So anyway, I make Android in a case where I usually wouldn't make it because I have both Dust Shoot and Solemn. So Dust Shoot will get rid of one problem card, and Solemn can get rid of another problem card. So I set both, and I pass, and I Dust Shoot him immediately. I send back his Gale, which is the problem. He goes Summon Greffer, pitches Vayu, pitches Sirocco, sets D Prison, and pass. And I draw into Future Fusion, the best card that I could have drawn at that point in time. So Future Fusion, I send Treeborn, and I send Malicious, and I activate Miracle Fusion. So at this point in time, the commentators are confused. Now, the commentators have done an excellent job throughout the event, providing insight to various players about their decks and about why they think various players made their decisions. But they were saying at this point that I misplayed. And if I had a Malicious in my hand, it doesn't make sense to send Malicious to the graveyard. But no one knows or understands this deck better than me. The results speak for itself. And they were also saying, even if I didn't have Malicious in my hand, it would have been better to send Malicious as I did, banish Malicious first, and then activate Miracle Fusion. But the reason why that play is incorrect is because by doing it that way, you can only get one use out of Malicious, which is the use that you acquire from the Miracle Fusion. But the way that I use it, you get 2 uses out of Malicious. 1 for Miracle Fusion, and 2, you get the option to use it as a synchro material. And let me show you. So I attack over his Greffer with both of my monsters, and he takes damage. He draws, he sets Bottomless, he passes, I activate Return, I bring back Malicious, and I bring back Diva. And I'm able to synchro into a level 8. Now, let's go back to what the commentator said. So had I banished Malicious, and then there would be a malicious in my graveyard already, and there would be a malicious banish, which means when this malicious goes to the graveyard, I don't have a malicious in my deck. Now for turn, I drew an absolute broken card, which was a tuner that I wasn't expecting to draw. But it just goes to show why I made the play that I did. Because in this scenario, not only am I able to summon Absolute Zero and Stardust, but I'm also able to summon another level 8 because I didn't use Malicious effect yet. That's exactly why I sent Malicious off of Future Fusion and banished it. So anyway, I summon Stardust, I tribute to negate, I have Solemn for this other back row that I know is a deep prison, but I make Thought Ruler. And this is exactly what I was just explaining earlier, right? Android and Thought Ruler, they're a really good combination. Because even though I have Solemn, so it actually just doesn't matter what this back row is. Because I have Thought Ruler, I can attack with Android, he activates Deep Prison, and it says that Deep Prison targets. So I pay 1,000 with Thought Ruler, he takes 24, and then I attack direct with 27, and that's a game. So this is why Android is much better than that level 3 monster whose name is irrelevant. So anyway, that is game 1. Now on to game 2. So for game 2, I open up my side deck card, Consecrated Light. But even though Consecrated Light is really good, it can be risky to just summon it first turn, especially without any protection. And let me show you why. My opponent goes flip summon DD Warrior Lady and attack direct for, well, not direct, but it might as well be a direct attack because I take 1,500 points of damage. So this puts me in an awkward spot, and at this point I have two choices. I can either summon a level 5 Synchro, but the problem is the level 5 Synchro can't beat over DD Warrior Lady. So if I'm going to lose my Synchro anyway, then it's best to at least take the back row with it. So I decide to go for Black Rose. So I summon Prodigy, I summon Diva, I Synchro, I make Black Rose. He does Bottomless, and I'm okay with that because I have a Gores. But unfortunately for me, Dimitri opened up so weak that he wasn't able to go for an offensive push. So he sets a monster, he sets a back row, and he passes. If he's not going to commit to the field, I'm not going to commit to the field. I just set Treeborn because I still want to drop Gores. And if I summon Dark Grepher, the odds of me being able to summon Gores are a lot less likely. So he finally goes for an offensive play. He flips up his Vayu, attacks my set Treeborn, and I draw for turn. So I decide, well, it's now or never. It's time to be offensive. I summon Grepher and I run over his Vayu. And on his turn, he draws a Bora. His Bora crashes into my Dark Grepher, which I'm okay with. And here, I'm thinking about what I should do. Should I bring back Treeborn or should I not? And ultimately, I decide to bring back Treeborn. The reason being is because at this point, I'm not thinking about Blizzard because that card is just so broken. I'm actually more thinking about Shora. If he has Shora, then he's going to run over my Treeborn and he's going to get his +1 anyway. So I decide to bring back Treeborn, which in hindsight was a mistake because if he has Blizzard, which he does, then he has the opportunity to make Armwing. And then with Armwing, he can just get 2,700 points of damage. However, at the same time, right, let's say I didn't bring back Treeborn. Because Dimitri is such a good player, I'm sure if I went just summon Sangan and attack, instead of making Armwing, he would have just made Bionic, and he would have just bounced back the Sangan, which would have worked in my favor because I have Gores. So in hindsight, summoning Treeborn was a mistake. So I summon Treeborn, I summon Sangan, I attack direct for 1,000. I don't set my back rows because I still want to summon this Gores, and he's able to make Armwing, and he gets 2,700 points of damage, which is a lot. He sets a back row. I draw for turn a really good card, so I'm able to actually go for a big push here. Now I don't have Solemn Judgment set because once again, I anticipated on summoning Gores. So I go Brain Control, I summon Diva for Diva, and he has Torrential. If he didn't have Torrential here, then that would have been it, right? Because this back row is deep prison, so yeah, he probably would have deep prisoned one of my guys, but it doesn't matter because I have Return, and I also have Solemn to stop the Brain Control, so it would have just been over. It simply would have been over. But we don't live in the land of woulda, coulda, shouldas. So he torrentials me and I lose my board, and I search out a second Consecrated Light because I know that this card is so good against Blackwings. And I'm at 3k. So because I'm at 3k, I'm like, it's possible that I can die in one shot, but it really just depends. Because I know he has access to at least 2,500 points of damage right here. So I set both of my back rows, and he does have Heavy Storm, which is a little bit unfortunate because I could have used Return to save myself. But I don't use Return here because that would drop me down to 15. And I can bring back Black Rose, and then he can like attack over, and I'll take 100, and that'll bring me down to 14. So if he pretty much has Qualoot, he wins, right? So either way, if he has Qualoot when I return, or if he has Qualoot when I don't return, he wins. So I don't even bother chaining the return. So anyway, he does have the Qualoot. So he attacks, he Qualoots, and that's GG. So on to game 3. Now game 3, my opening hand is not too strong, but I do have Gold Sark, which means if I can survive 2 turns, all will be well. So I set Torrential because I don't want to Torrential my Consecrated Light, and I pass. And Dimitri just passes. Very smart on him because we can see he actually does have DD Warrior Lady, but he's saving it for Consecrated Light. So I'm okay with that because the more turns I get, the higher chances of me winning are because I have Future Fusion coming up. So I draw for turn and I also pass. He wrote us for Greffer, he summons, and he says no priority. So even though I have Torrential, I don't activate it because he's not using priority, so there's no reason to do it. So if I don't activate Torrential, then he can think that this card is something else, right? And that can cause him to overextend, and then when he overextends, I can Torrential at that point. But he doesn't do anything. He just swings direct for 17. I MST his back row because I don't want that card to be like a Mind Crush or something like that. So before the standby phase, I space it. It's Royal Oppression. That card completely ruins me, but thankfully I MST. So I'm able to successfully activate and resolve Future Fusion, banish Mali for Mali, and I attack direct, and surprise, surprise, Gores. And I'm not going to lie, at this point, my heart stopped because I'm like, oh, wow, he's going to take this set from me. Because if you look at my hand, I don't really have an out to Gores, right? So if he just keeps attacking, then he's going to be in a good situation. And also, if I set a bunch of back rows, it just sets me up to get Heavy Storm. So I don't do anything, and I just have to hope and pray that he summons into this Torrential. So he attacks over my Caius, I take some damage, and he attacks direct with 24. So now I'm in a bad spot, and I pull Brain Control. A really, really good card, but Brain Control doesn't do anything here. But I think to myself, okay, well, at the very least, if I Brain Control his Gores and I run over his token, then I can summon Consecrated Light. And the reason why I have to do it this way is because the Gores token is actually a light monster. So because the Gores token is a light monster, that would mean that if I just summon Consecrated Raw, this can run over and I'll take 24 and I'll take 27 and that's game. So by running over his Gores token, which is a light, then I'm not in a bad situation anymore. So I Brain Control his Gores, I attack, and he activates Deep Prison. And I'm like, it's just not easy. Like, I just have to play Yu-Gi-Oh! So evaluating the situation, I realized that if I get Heavy Stormed, I lose. And if I try to play around Heavy Storm, I also lose. So I just say, well, if you got it, you got it. So I set Bottomless, I set Return, and I set Consecrated. And I just say, well, if he has Heavy Storm, then it was well played by him. Now, he thinks about what to do. He allures, and he banishes the Blizzard. He goes Whirlwind into Shora. So at this point, I think about what to do. So I have two options. I can Bottomless or I can Torrential. But once again, guys, this token is light. So it means the token can run over my Consecrated. So I'm actually forced to activate Torrential. Not to mention, I have Absolute Zero coming back next turn. He's at 46, and I have Return set. So if I pull into like a tuner, then that will be game. Not to mention I have 2 darks in the grave. So if I find a way to put a 3rd dark in the grave too, that'll also be game. So I'm like, okay, torrential is the best course here. So I torrential and I draw into Sangan. And I do some math in my head and I'm like, okay, I can summon Sangan, I can return malicious, and I can attack with everything with 0, but it's still not game. So the best play that I have is just actually attacking and then setting Sangan. The reason why I set Sangan is because this actually plays around brain control. So I attack direct for 25 and I set Sangan and I pass. He thinks about what to do and he sets a monster. And with that, I knew it was game. Because unless this is a Falsodina, and even if it is a Falsodina, it doesn't matter. So I just summon Spine Gilman, I flip up Sangan, 0 attack, and he concedes. And that is the first round of top 8. So now, because I'm so far undefeated in the tournament, at the very least, I'm guaranteed 3rd place. So with that, on to the next. Okay, so this is winners finals. The winner of this set goes on to the finals. So it's me up against SouthCityDuelist, and he's another Blackwing player. Spoiler alert, this is Stevie, the person who won the event. So you already know how this one ends. Now, my opponent does open up quite well with Whirlwind into Bora and a set back row. Now, looking at my opening hand, as you can see, it's dead. And it doesn't help that my opponent is playing an accelerated game due to Black Whirlwind. So I think immediately the way that I win this is by clearing his back rows as soon as possible. So I Sark for heavy and I set bottomless. Because at least at this current game state, if he summons a monster, I'll go bottomless, I'll take 17. There's no reason for him to collude. So I can stall out for 2 turns until I make a big push and potentially win the game. But unfortunately for your boy, he has MST. So he spaces my back row, and that means he's just free to do whatever he wants. He draws Shura for turn, by the way. Summons Shura, searches out the Gale, specials the Gale, and then just puts in a lot of damage. So that means that this game is going to be over right here and now if I don't draw something. So I draw for turn, Diva. And once again, guys, welcome to the Diva Hero OTK. The problem is he has too many cards on the field. There's no way that I can clear everything. So the best play that I can do is the one that I ultimately did. So I go summon Diva for Diva. I synchro into Bionic. I pitch, return his back row. And of course, the reason why I have to return his back row is because if it's anything to stop an attack, I'm in a bad situation. And we can see that it was. He had D-Prison. And I make Darken. The reason why I make Darken over any other level 8 synchro is because I need to clear as many of his monsters as possible. So I Darken and I send Gale. The reason why I send Gale and not Bora is because Gale is the problem of the deck. Gale gives the deck access to cards like Black Rose. So if I don't kill the Gale, then I'm in a bad spot. So I Darken the Gale and I make Absolute Zero and I Brio pitch and I return the Bora. Now, at this point in time, I did not know that South City is not on brain control. That's actually the reason why I did this play, is because if all these attacks go through, it puts him outside of brain control range. And if he normal summons Bora again, I'm okay with that because what is he going to add? He can't add Gale and go into Black Rose. And if he adds Blizzard, that's fine because it'll be too late because I'll be able to kill him on my turn. So I return his Bora and I attack with everything, and that drops him down to 600. So I'm in a really fragile situation because there's so many cards that he can pull to win, right? Sirocco is game. If he has a Blizzard, it's not game, but it can clear my board. So I'm at the mercy of whatever he has. And he draws for turn, Solemn. Now, mind you, turn 1, I sarked for a Heavy Storm, which means on my next turn, I'm getting Heavy Storm. But on his turn, he draws a Solemn. So he thinks about what to do, and he does indeed summon the boar again and searches out a Blizzard. He attacks and he colutes over, and that gives him 3 darks. And he has Dark Arm. If he didn't have Dark Arm, look, I can potentially just win, right? Because pretty much I just go Brio, well, I go heavy, right? And then he plays whatever he plays, and then I go Brio and I bounce his monster and I attack for game. It's like he needed to have, I mean, there were plenty of cards he could have had, right? But he needed to have Dark Arm or Sirocco, and it's just so unfortunate that he had the one of, like, losing a Dark Arm is just such an icky feeling. So anyway, he drops Dark Arm, and Dark Arm allows him to clear both of our fields, and he sets everything. So I draw for turn, heavy. So at this point, there's no reason not to heavy. So I just play heavy, and he plays the Solemn that he just drew previously, and that leaves him with 2 back rows and a Whirlwind, and I know he has Blizzard because he searched it. So I set Mirror Force and I pass, and he goes Whirlwind to Blizzard, and he makes a level 6. Now here he made Armwing. I'm not sure why he didn't make Brionic, because it was clear that I didn't have any response to the summon, and he hadn't used Brionic yet. So if he makes Brionic and he pitches my back row, he can just attack for game because I'm at 22. But anyway, he attacks and I activate Mirror Force. So this gives me a shot, right? So I already got rid of his Solemn, so I'm just like, okay, if I pull a monster here, then I can win. So I draw for turn, I draw Prodigy, which is exact lethal. A special Prodigy, and he deprisons, right? And he already had a deprison, so I can't say like he top decked it, but it's just like, it comes down to just like, wow. Like drawing Shora off the top and then drawing Solemn off the top right after, but it's Blackwings, right? It is what it is. So he makes Brio finally, and that's game 1. Now, game 2, I'm hoping that things turn out a little bit better. I look at my opening hand, and it's not good, but it is good enough to stall. And the thing about Diva Hero is, if I stall long enough, I'm actually going to be able to win. Now, Solemn and Decree, they might seem a bit conflicting, and that's because they are. But in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, if he summons anything that can beat over Consecrated, such as a Cyber Dragon or a DD Warrior Lady, then immediately I'll flip up Solemn. And I'll be in a good spot, and I'll just be able to draw until my deck pulls a card like Rhoda or Dark Grepher or Stratos or anything, right? Even a Caius. So I set 2 and I pass, and his go, he's actually not able to out the Consecrated, and I draw into my second Decree. And I'm like, that wasn't a good draw, but sure. Let me just switch Consecrated and stall. So I switch Consecrated, he draws, he sets, he passes, and I draw into Miracle Fusion. And I'm like, that also wasn't a good draw, but it's fine because I still have Consecrated back behind a Decree, so at least I can stall. So I end my turn. On the end phase, he activates Icarus, and then I flip up Decree, and that puts me in a really good situation. All right. Now on his turn, he allures, and he already had the Cyber Dragon, which is why he targeted the 2 back rows, right? But I couldn't just let the Icarus go through. So he special summons Cyber Dragon, runs over my Consecrated, and then he has Blizzy. He summons Blizzard, which puts me in a very bad situation because now he can make a level 8 Synchro. And the best Synchro to make in this situation is Stardust. So now I have to deal with Stardust back behind 3 back rows. I'm not too worried about the back rows because I have Decree, and I draw for turn, and I draw Malicious. So guys, let's recap, right? For this game, I drew double Malicious, double Decree, double Miracle Fusion, and double something else. I have 4 doubles basically, right? So I mean, you can see. So I just pulled terrible, absolutely. Oh, Consecrated, right? Terrible, absolutely terrible. So there's nothing I can do, and it's like if I would have drew for turn like a Diva or anything, like I would have been able to like stall some more because I'm at 8,000. But anyway, I just do the best that I can, and I think about what to do, and I just pass. Like, this doesn't do anything, right? This literally doesn't do anything. So I take a lot of damage, and I'm just like, okay. And I draw for turn. And right, that's why I was having a hard time thinking of it, because I haven't pulled my Consecrated left. I draw for turn, and it was Consecrated. So this is just a very, very sad game, right? Just doubles of everything. The only card I didn't get double of was Dark Arm and Solemn, which don't do anything. So I think about, okay, well, I still have a chance to draw into another card if he misplays. If I set Consecrated Light and he attacks into it with like a dark monster, it won't die. And then like he can attack over it with Stardust, and then like if he doesn't have Collude, like I'll just take some damage and I get another draw. So that's what I do. And fortunately for me, he does indeed attack with a dark monster. So Consecrated lives, he attacks with Stardust, I'm okay with that. And then he attacks with Blizzy, I take 13, but he has the Collude, so that's GG's. And, you know, he said GG's well played. I'm just like, exactly. Like, I don't have anything to say. Anyway, definitely South City is a great duelist, and I had a great set with him. But it's just unfortunate that, like, my deck just said no. My deck simply just said no. But anyway, that was Winners Finals. So, on to the next. Okay, so this is the last set of my tournament run. So, spoiler alert, you know how this goes. I'm up against Callum. And I really wanted to win against this guy because he played against my teammate Frazier earlier in the tournament. So I wanted to extract my revenge on him, but unfortunately I wasn't quite able to. So I do lose the RPS and my opponent goes first. And it just shows you how powerful going first in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is. Because look at my hand. If I go first, I go Summon Diva, make Catasters, Tech Devi, and I pass. And I simply ruin him. Now, Callum is a very good player. So he's been known throughout the tournament to hit people with pro heavies. So that's what he does, right? He sets his heavy storm and he passes. And I have two plays. I can either summon Diva and go for Catastor Deck Devi, or summon Sangan. Now, the reason why I don't summon Diva is because if I go summon Diva and make Catastor, he can just go Torrential, right? And I know he's on Hero Beat, right? Because he's in the top 8. We all know what we're playing. And Deck Devi isn't the strongest card against Hero Beat. But against Callum's particular list, after I saw the deck list when they became public, actually Deck Devi is quite good. It hits a lot of targets in its deck. But anyway, at the time, I'm thinking he's just running like the traditional Hero Beat. So I'm thinking, okay, Deck Devi is not that good. So I summon Sangan and I attack for 1,000. I expect to get Deep Prison, but I don't. I set Mirror Force, Sark for Heavy because Heavy is really good against Hero Beat, and I pass. So on his turn, he flips up the Pro Heavy, but it's only 1 for 1, so it's not too bad. He goes Summon Diva into Spine Gilman. He makes Android and runs over my Sangan. Now, looking at his hand, had I went for the Catastor play, Catastor Deck Devi play, it would have been over. Because now I know completely what he has. Plus, he doesn't have this Diva into this Gilman, so this Android isn't here. His whole hand is dead. Like, this is a free game 1 if I actually go for the Deck Devi play. But it was too risky and I didn't go for it. So I take some damage, and with that, I search out Prodigy because I need a hero. And remember, against Diva Hero, you need, or rather with Diva Hero, you need to quickly get access to your heroes and your warders. So he sets 4 and he passes. And I draw for turn, I draw Diva. Terrible draw, absolutely terrible draw, because like she doesn't do anything in this situation. I set Treeborn and I pass. He draws in the Stratos, he e-calls in the Stratos, he searches out an alias, so now he's cooking. He's cooking. Runs over my Treeborn, and I tax Wreck for 18, he ends, he gains 600, and I draw Heavy Storm. So at this point, I'm thinking to myself, if he has Starlight Road, he wins. There's nothing I can do to counter Starlight Road. I don't even have an option to like bait it out. Like if he has Starlight Road, he wins. If he has Solemn Judgment, there's a chance I can win. Because assuming he doesn't have a card like Bottomless, right? Which he did. He had, all his back rows were real, right? So assuming he doesn't have a card like Bottomless and he has Solemn Judgment instead, I go Heavy Storm, he Solemns, drops him down to 41. Then I can go for a Black Rose play. Summon Prodigy, Summon Diva, Synchro, Black Rose, blow up his field. And now suddenly the advantage is to me. So that's the play that I go for. I go Heavy Storm and he flips up Road. And that was it. As soon as he resolved this Starlight Road, I was like, there's no way that I can win this game one at all. But I'm like, all right, well, I still got to try because now the option to make Black Rose is gone. However, I can make Gilman and equip Gilman with Armory Arm to have a big guy on the field. So that's my next play that I go for, but he bottomlesses the Gilman. So I can make Armory Arm, but Armory Arm doesn't do anything here. I'm just playing cards at this point. I crash into his Stratos. I set 2. He goes end phase call. And I just don't even bother to play this out. I just concede. Just like, all right, well, GG's. So on to game 2. Now, game 2, I open up my side deck cards, which are quite good. Royal Decree is amazing against Hero Beat. Amazing against decks that have multiple traps like Hero Beat, Black Wings, Vegas Turbo. So I'm definitely happy with this side deck choice of mine. So I set Decree and I set Sangan. The reason why I don't set Torrential is because I don't want to get heavy stormed. So he goes set 2 and I go end phase Decree. Now, on my turn here, I think about what to do. And actually, with the current board I have now, I have game. And I was reviewing this over with my friend and he said, Cairo, you missed lethal. Because he was saying that I should do this play. Special summon Dark Grepher by pitching Malicious. Then activate Dark Grepher's effect, pitch Plague, and it doesn't matter the dark that I pitch, right? Stack a card for Plague, sync her with Plague and Sangan, and make Android. So now on my field is Android and Dark Grepher and Malicious Engrave. Sangan, search out Diva. Summon Diva, get Spine Gilman, banish Molly for Molly, make a level 8. And now I have Gilman, a level 8, Grepher, and Android on the field. Attack with everything for game. And I acknowledge that, yes, that play does lead to game. However, it's not the optimal play. That's the 8 play, but it's not the optimal play. The reason why it's not the optimal play is because that play loses to DD Crow. So once again, imagine I do that play. I pitch Molly for Grepher. And then I activate Grepher's effect, and I send Plague, and I send a Dark. Now, when I attempt to go stack for Plague, if my opponent goes DD Crow, my field is just Sangan and Dark Grepher. That's it. And if he pulls any monster, like Stratos or Alias, now I just lose. So yes, that play would have led to game, but it's not optimal because it loses to DD Crow. This play that I do, although it's not game, it doesn't lose to DD Crow because, just watch. Pitch Molly, special summon Grepher, flip up Sangan, normal summon Plague. So if my opponent has DD Crow, then he can choose to DD Crow either my Sangan or DD Crow my Malicious. It doesn't matter. But the point is, I still have a Synchro on board that can beat over anything that he summons. So my end board winds up being Android, Stardust, and Grepher. And I search out Crow. The reason why I search out Crow instead of Diva is because the only way that he can come back is with Miracle Fusion. And look at his grave. He doesn't have anything in the grave. So DD Crow ensures that I win this game. So I attack direct with everything. End phase, I gain 600. And on his turn, he actually draws into Alias. So once again, that's why the previous play was not good, because if he had DD Crow and now he draws into Alias, I just lose. So he goes summon Alias. Alias runs over Grepher. I take 200. I draw for turn and I smashing, so I don't even have to worry about Honest, and that's the game. Of course he activates Spark, but it doesn't matter. Tribute to negate, attack, and he loses out to Decree. Okay, so game 3, I don't open up quite well. And as I said before, actually the best card to Sark for is Gold Sark. But look at my opening hand. If I don't Sark for Future Fusion, then my hand is completely dead. So I Sark for Future Fusion. Thankfully, he also opened up quite weak because he didn't summon anything. And he attacks direct with 15. Now, looking at my opening hand, I have to get rid of Ocean. Reason being, Ocean is such a problematic card. If you leave Ocean on the field against the Hero Beat deck, then things will begin to spiral downhill very quickly. Now, yes, he doesn't have any targets for Ocean, but still, it's best to get rid of this guy before he becomes a problem. So I summon Cyber Dragon and I attempt to beat over his Ocean, but he deprisons. So I set Mirror Force and I pass. He summons Alias and he attacks with both, and I force. Now, of course, I could have held on to my Mirror Force, but this is a lot of damage to take. And even though life points generally don't matter, I wanted to get rid of Ocean. That was my primary concern. Now, on his turn, he sets 2 and he passes. So I finally get my Future Fusion off Gold Sark and I draw another Gold Sark for turn. So I think for a second and then I Future Fusion, I send Molly and I send Diva, and with my second Gold Sark, I Sark for return. Because as you can see, this is lining up so that I kill him in the next 2 to 3 turns. So I Sark for return and I pass. He summons Alias and I take some damage. Now, of course, the previous turn I could have activated Miracle Fusion, but the reason why I didn't was because I wanted to get maximum value out of my Miracle Fusion. What do I mean by maximum value? Well, when Zero leaves the field, he blows up your opponent's monsters. Meaning that if your opponent has a card like Bottomless and then I activate Miracle Fusion, if my opponent has no monsters, then it was a 1-for-1. But if my opponent has 1, 2, 3 or more monsters, at that point it becomes a plus. I can generate a lot of advantage. So it's all about the timing that you use Miracle Fusion. Now, looking at my graveyard, actually I don't have any heroes that I want to banish. Yes, I have the Malicious, and yes, I do have Return coming soon. But if I can avoid banishing the Malicious, then it's best to avoid it because I can pull into a card like Deep Sea Diva or Plague Spreader the following turn. So I activate Mind Control, he lets it go, and I attempt to activate Miracle Fusion, but Callum activates Hero Blast. A really good play by him because it forces me to banish my Malicious anyway. And back to what I was saying about getting value out of your cards, he's able to Bottomless my Zero at a 1-for-1 rate. So it worked out very favorably for Callum. Now here I set Decree and I pass. On his turn, he activates Miracle Fusion, which was expected. And the reason why I activated Miracle Fusion is because I set Decree is because my life points are at 46, which is very low. And I wanted to essentially like scare Callum into overcommitting because I had a feeling that he had Miracle Fusion and I'm okay taking 25. But if I take more damage, then I get outside of brain control range, or I get to the point where even if he just sneezes, I lose. So he does indeed summon his other alias. So he's not worried about my back row, and it wasn't real. It was just a decree. So I take both and it drops me down to 200 and I draw for turn. So I draw Heavy Storm, but immediately he activates Gemini Spark to prevent me from bringing out my Absolute Zero. So that puts me in a very awkward situation. So I activate Heavy Storm. And the reason why I activate Heavy Storm is because I want to get rid of this back row that could be a potential problem. So I Heavy Storm to get rid of the potential problem. I set 2. I'm not worried about Gores because I'm at 200. So this Gores is not getting dropped. I set 2 and I hope that this scares him. Actually, there's no reason to activate Heavy Storm before, but the reason why I did it was a scare tactic. By activating Heavy Storm on my own card, I can potentially make Callum think that I have a card like not Mirror Force because it's in the grave, but Torrential. So anyway, Callum is not afraid. He Rotas and he summons his Stratos. Now he put it here, which is a little weird, and I'm not sure why he did that. Callum, even though he's a really good player, throughout the tournament he has been rule sharking people, right? So let's say, for example, that I did have Torrential and then he put his Stratos here and I activated Torrential. Would he have been like, oh, I never summoned it, I just put it there because I searched it out? Or would he have been like, oh, okay, well, Stratos gets Torrential? I don't know. But anyway, this didn't come up because I didn't have Torrential. So with no fear, he does summon Stratos, and that puts me in a terrible situation because he's going for the effect to pop a back row. So now even this bluff Miracle Fusion is going to get destroyed. And I have to activate the return in order to stop myself from getting lethaled. So I chain, return, he pops my back row, he just ends his turn, everything gets banished, he sets a back row, I draw in Diva, which is actually a good draw here, right? Because I haven't pulled in the Spine Gilman yet. And I make Catastor. So at this point, I have to attack because my life points are at 100. And if I don't attack on his turn, he'll go absolute 0, attack over my Catastor, Catastor dies, and then he'll attack direct with Stratos for game, right? So I have to attack now. So I summon Catastor, I attempt to run over his Stratos, the attack doesn't go through, he flips up Mirror Force, and that's GG. That's the tournament run. So it was definitely a good tournament, and I'm happy to have gotten 3rd place, and your boy ATrueHero has done it again. But I just have one question for you. How many times do I have to top before I get to 1K subs? Anyway, guys, if you enjoyed the content, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, ATrueHero out. Peace.
Subscribe or you too will be sent to the Shadow Realm.